wearables are helpful from an awareness perspective. There are a lot of different kinds out there. So you have to figure out what you want to do and how you're going to use it. If you don't have a clear idea on how it's going to help you directly from what information you're looking for and how you're going to use that information to make a better training decision or recovery decision, I would just honestly forego it and find the thing that is going to be most useful, which is probably a watch for most people. Depending upon where you are, if you're a beginner, look at the simple stuff. Maybe your steps, maybe your sleep. Those are probably good ones for you to focus on. If you're a little more robust and advanced, probably look at your HRV, probably look at maybe some of the stride asymmetry stuff if you have an Apple Watch. Like, I think that there's a lot of really great value depending upon what you're trying to maximize. If you're trying to maximize recovery, probably want to pick the various devices and variables that are going to give you the most insight on recovery.
Welcome back to Beyond the Pump, where today we are going to be getting into the nitty-gritty when it comes to tech wearables. So you've probably seen a ton of different wearables that are out there, anywhere from like the Apple Watch, your Garmin watches. Whoop is a really big one. Oura Rings, that's been all over my TikTok feed lately. And so we're just going to dive in and see what they're all about, how we can use those to help our clients reach their goals, and how to choose which wearable tech is the best one for your needs. So, Andrew, I know that you have quite a diverse portfolio of wearable techs. I know we were talking about that right before we started off, but yeah, let's. I want to kick it over to you. What kind of devices are you running with?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a habitual data collector, and just to preface my strange addiction of collecting things that measure things on me that I may not actually use on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, currently I do wear an Apple Watch Ultra, the first generation, which does have a oxygen saturation thing. It's currently 2024, so they did just release the re-released Apple Ultra, watch number 2. They basically just re-rolled that into a different color and was like, oh, hey, it's new. Do better, Apple, please. But I'm also wearing an Oura Ring. I just transitioned out of a Oura Ring 3 into an Oura Ring 4, and I'm testing that one out currently. And the last one is a Whoop strap. Those are the 3 main wearables that are probably the biggest giants in the space outside of, Fitbit, Garmin. Some people even still wear polars, depending upon what your activity looks like and if you're off trekking through the woods and whatnot. So I think those are the ones that I'm wearing. What are you rocking right now?
Just the Apple Watch Ultra, number 1. But it's funny that you brought up Polar, because that's actually what started me off with the gear. Back, I think I was like sophomore in high school. And don't use it how I used it. But it's a long story short, I was eating at my BMR calories. I would put the Polar heart rate monitor on my chest, and I would earn my calories. So I developed a real nice eating disorder from that. I had to earn my calories. I lost a lot of weight though, but don't follow my example. Not the best way to maintain muscles. But anyways, definitely, that's kind of a negative when it comes to wearing some tech wearables. But how, especially with just so many options nowadays, there's got to be data that obviously says, hey, these are better, and for our performances and for data. How can fitness wearables enhance our accountabilities and motivation, especially when we're working with clients who are, especially now, it's almost like analysis by paralysis, a lot of data out there, but how can we use tech wearables for their best outcome?
I mean, that's a really great question. I think that, there was a period of time where research, and I will give credit to Whoop, they do have a human performance lab that they conduct novel research on. And so I will say that that's probably one of the better things that I like, is that they're constantly checking and stress testing their stuff. But as far as what it looks like, and just kind of backing up for a second here, they're all about 60% accurate from a sleep tracking perspective. There was an independent study that I can't remember where it came out of, but it was about 4 years ago now. And basically what it suggested was that they hooked people up to some polysomnography, or basically like a sleep study. They put all these wearables on these poor folks. They did look at an Oura Ring at the time. They looked at an Apple Watch. They looked at a Whoop strap. They looked at a Polar. They looked at like about 6 or 7 different things. And I don't know who would get good sleep strapped up to us like, elephant looking mask. And on top of that, you got all this other crazy stuff just to measure. But they found that they were all within about 5 to 10% of each other. So the accuracy of them, I think it was like 60% of roughly what some of the gold standard devices from a medical grade and clinical grade, analytic systems actually look like. So they're not the most accurate. Granted, if you have enough information for a long enough period of time, you can measure change, which is actually what most people care about. I promise you, if someone said, hey, I weigh 200 pounds and they wanted to lose 50 pounds, well, the difference ultimately becomes their perception of what that weight is. And that comes from, like if you looked and felt the way you wanted to look and feel, would the weight and the number itself matter? Not necessarily, but the change would matter because we find that, feeling like you're making progress is important. So that's the reason why I think, to me, and what I find meaningful for the clients that I've coached over the last couple decades is that you have to be able to measure progress, and watching weight fall off the scale takes a little bit longer than what most people are probably mentally equipped to handle. And having things that measure progress that's a little more micro, like a daily sleep score, like a daily heart rate variability, like those are helpful for clients to see that they are making progress. They are moving in the right physiological direction over time. I use HRV as probably one of the cornerstone measurements to determine if someone is ready for more stress from a training perspective, if they've adapted, if it's too easy, if their lifestyle is going crazy and they maybe need a break. And so that's kind of how I use wearables, ultimately to enhance that accountability and that motivation. But, as far as yourself goes, I mean, do you find that you use that with clients? Do you use it with yourself more? Like, tell us about your usage.
I definitely use it a ton more for myself than I have for previous clients. If they have any sort of fitness device to track their data, that just helps, the whole entire process.
Yeah.
To allow them. I mean, again, all data, it's really what you decide to do with that data. Like I can have all the data in the world, but if I don't know how to interpret it, I don't know how to incorporate it into my client's plans. It's like, all right, cool. You walk 10,000 steps a day. All right. Well, fun fact kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where if they did have an Apple Watch, it was great because they already have that. They already probably have a baseline with whatever it may be, with their sleep, with their steps that they may not have even known about.
Mm-hmm.
I also have worked with clients though that don't want to, like I have a friend, she was so like anti Apple Watch because she didn't want Apple getting her data. And so it's like, all right, all data, that's the one that you don't want them to see. And so for her though, I mean, again, we kind of took a step back and we got her just a pedometer that strapped on her shoe just so we can get a baseline of her steps. Cause I was like, I'm going to need that. You work a desk job. And so it didn't have to be the fanciest of all gears. All that did was add an extra talking point in our conversations. Like, hey, did you write your steps down? How many did you average out for the week or whatever, however long it may be? So it kind of takes the guessing game out, even if it's, she wasn't wearing her shoes 24/7. It's still like, okay, well, when she had shoes on, we know she's walking X amount of steps. For me though, I'm a data snob. Like I even have all my workouts tracked all the way back from like 2014 up at before I started getting into CrossFit, had every single data point because I was like, okay, objectively, now that I see these numbers, I know a good day training wise would be pushing a certain amount of number for myself, which is why I think it's so important to know, am I getting decent sleep objectively? I feel good, but did I actually recover? And so I think that's where the value of these tech wearables are, because the longer you have them on, the more trends it's able to collect over that time. I think a lot of times, I feel like I have a lot more friends that use their Apple Watch interchangeably. Like this thing, if it had more than like a day life battery for myself, it would be on me 24/7. Like that's like, just feed the beast. I want it to have everything about me so that I can make the best even when I take a shower now, I'm like, I take it off and I'm like, this could be some valuable data in the shower. But it's so I use it a ton for myself. I'm looking into getting a Oura Ring or Ultra Human Ring TikTok videos are really trying to sway me in my decisions. But yeah, I feel like it's really helped a ton when it comes to my performance, not just at the gym, but also my daily life, understanding, oh, this is probably why I am not in a good mood. My stress was super high. I didn't get good sleep. Therefore, this is the result of that. So it's been kind of cool to be able to see that outside of any type of fitness things. And I feel like I'm doing all right now. I'm doing okay. At least I'm aware. And I'm probably fixed it like 10% of the time, or maybe 10% difference in that. So,
well, I think you bring up a great point in that at the end of the day, wearables are a great objective measuring stick, the same way that, depending upon the day, depending on how people feel, depending upon what happened when they walk into a training session, some people may take the same number and have a complete meltdown. It's kind of like if you don't get enough sleep, everything kind of amplifies and magnifies and things become much more significant. Even the small things, people tend to make mountains out of molehills, I think is the saying. And I think that wearables are really great for people that are both advanced and looking for the margins and the gaps where they can easily start to look at stuff. And there's just too much stuff to pay attention to. And I think that Apple Watch, for all of its, the walled garden and the drawbacks and the tech slowdown that's happening right now, because I don't think they'll see significant advancements for a while. I think the tech's just kind of almost hit its little bit of a pinnacle. The AI stuff will be interesting. But, when you consider the evolution of that, it's going to collect a large component of an active graph. Like you're looking at how much activity are you doing, how much sleep you're getting. Some of it even compiles and will import from Chronometer or MyFitnessPal, your nutrition stuff. And it's just too much information for most people, which is why I say the people that are more advanced might benefit from having more information. Whereas in the people that aren't as advanced, or maybe you're just a beginner, or maybe your clients are often beginners, it might make sense for you. And I'm sure we've all seen this where someone's doing a set of some leg extensions and they've never really trained legs before, and they get to 10 and they're like, oh my gosh, it's so hard. When you ask them how it felt, which if you're not asking people how sets feel and you're a personal trainer, like you're missing out on a lot of great valuable information for RPE and reps in reserve and intensity, right? But if someone says they get to 10, like, oh, their legs are tired, and you're like, oh, okay, let me take it for what you just said, face value, and let's go ahead and just keep the weight there. Right. Well, it turns out that maybe you do feel sadistic one day and you're like, you know what? We've been doing this weight for a while. Let's go ahead and stack on 20 more pounds and let's see how many you can do. Turns out they're able to do 25 at 20 extra pounds. And so their barometer, my point as I couch this, is that they might not be a reliable source because they don't know what the threshold is, the same way that people relate their pain scale. If we say, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is that pain? They're like, it's a 10, and it's a bee sting. Well, that might be the most painful thing they've ever experienced. So the idea isn't necessarily to take them for their word, but rather to broaden their exposure, broaden their awareness, and upgrade their ability to deliver meaningful feedback. But that's why people benefit from a coach in 2024, and why your value as coaches and professionals is so enriching, because everyone that's training doesn't train to stay the same. They train to improve, whether that's they want to improve their body composition, their performance, maybe how they feel. And if they're not making progress towards that direction, the idea is, well, how much more effort do they need to put into whatever domain that's relevant? And that's where trackers like this that usually look at your fitness and your activity stuff can be really helpful to help that person ground their perspective in, this is what a 10 feels like. I don't really much care for Whoop's strain because it seems like it's an odd 21 point scale, and it kind of gives me like old Borg RPE scale, which is like from 6 to 20, rate your exertion. And they were trying to do it compared to your heart rate, and they found it was actually kind of reliable. But at the same time, if you ask someone that has very little self-awareness around their fitness and fatigue and effort, they're like, oh my God, it's an 18. There's too many things for them to pick from. Whereas then you take someone that's been doing it for a while, they might give you a better answer. So all that to say, like, awareness is key. And I think you hit a great point with, it just helps you determine how much effort might you potentially have to expend that day versus what that effort, if you did say that you had a really bad night of sleep, maybe you went in the next day, it was red or whatever, Athletic, the app tells you, and you're like, it doesn't know anything. And, you dump in, you go full send on your workout, and the next day you start to get sick. Right. So I think that's where the predictive stuff that you mentioned so far is really important. So when we look at the impact of data and like how that works, how do you actually use what you're seeing to influence what you're doing later that day?
Yeah, and it's I think for myself specifically, the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning, I have it actually on my home screen, and it tells me my recovery, and my sleep right there at the top. I have it on my home screen. That's the first thing that I look at in the morning. I'll look at that, look at my recovery score, look at kind of how well I slept. And that I go to the gym at 5:30 in the morning. I wake up at 5. And so I kind of can gauge if I'm waking up at 5, I am going to the gym no matter what. At that point now, it is now I look at that and use that as my scale. I'm like, am I doing RX today? Am I going to do the compete version of the workout today?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, this is my 3rd day of the week. My recovery score has been averaging down. I'll probably back it up instead of going balls to the wall and trying to compete with my buddy who does overhead lunges with a 70-pound dumbbell. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I barely want to do 50 pounds because of that score. Granted, though, other way around, if I'm seeing green, it's a Monday, maybe I'm a little bit more fresh from the weekend, got a little better sleep, I can look at that and say, okay, I can push a little harder. I feel a little more rested, a little bit stronger.
Mm-hmm.
At the point, though, where I'm like, I'm not entirely sure how much of that am I dictating versus how I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the balance I'm learning right now, where there may have been a misread in the middle of the night, or if I had to get up in the middle of the night and go pee, is that changed some of my sleep quality. And, it's that, and that's where I do take into real life account, like, how am I feeling? If it's like, I feel great today, but my recovery score was at 20%, but it's also because I forgot to put my watch on until like I fell asleep, and then I woke up and then put my watch on.
Yeah.
Still taking in that real life factor, which allows me to train to the best of my ability, but I also have now some data to back that up. Just it really just allows me to create better decision making. Better decision making really when it comes to my training. Because I used to just like, I'll work out 10 days a week. I don't see any negative repercussions from that. When I was back I was 18, I was a young buck. And I was like, the only reason I didn't go the 11th day is because my friends didn't want to go that day. So I was like, all right, I guess we're taking a rest day, forced rest day. Yeah. Knowing what I know now, but then back then I probably may have been shooting myself in the foot, probably wasn't recovering as properly, probably wasn't optimizing the potential gains that I was able to get back then, especially when I was very, very involved, a little bit more involved with the bodybuilding, powerlifting side of things back then. So with all that to be said, it's really the data has just been, especially, I mean, as we keep progressing, AI will probably even start being incorporated into these wearables in the future, where you click on it, it's like, hey, do 10 sets of 5 today instead of your 10 sets of 8 because your recovery score. And I'll be like, all right, thanks. Thanks, Elon, AI, or whoever is going to be voicing it. But it's been cool. It's been cool. It's exciting to just see the advancements in technology. But at the end of the day, still use your best judgment. But again, that data there is more so to guide you than it is to dictate you, I think, at the end of the day. But just train smart, train healthy. Don't be dumb like me.
Well, I mean, and there's something to be said when you're younger and you don't have a lot of training history. You can't afford to be that way. The way that you're not strong, the way that you are as you gain, you can't do as much damage with 10-pound dumbbells that you can with 50 or 70-pound dumbbells. So by all means, like, beat your body up. And if anything, when we look at teenage training populations, it's okay. So we don't want to freak you guys out if you are a high volume. And there actually are certain genetic markers that might even indicate that people respond better to high volume, which is why if you ever do look at the research, there's like, this person was a low volume and they had a lot of changes. This person was a higher volume. And like, it just kind of gets into a lot of the nitty gritty, which is why looking at your own information and understanding yourself with wearables on occasion can be helpful. I will say that a wearable is very similar to like tracking your food. I don't think most people would carry around a food scale. And I think if anything, like we've talked about and touted a lot of the positive benefits of having increased awareness around how your body might be responding. And I emphasize the word might. But at the end of the day, that's not always going to be the case. So there are certain use cases that you want to start to consider. If you're a performance athlete, wearables are great to understand at various points during your training phases. I would say during the preseason, that might be where you stop using them and you learn how to understand what your body's telling you. Because one of the worst things you can do is when you show up to a competition, there's a concept called nocebo, which is basically where if you woke up at 5:30 that morning and you had an 8:30 a.m. lifting session, and you're a power lifter or you're an Olympic lifter or whatever, insert track meet here, and it was red, you might start getting in your head and you actually might see some performance decrease, although physically and mentally you might not feel any different. So that's where you just want to, again, take some time to use it to help objectify some of your perspective, the same way that you're like, oh, that's a 4-ounce chicken breast. And you actually eventually like, well, I'm gaining weight. Let me go ahead and actually weigh a chicken breast. And it's like 10 ounces. You're like, oh, okay. Right. So I would say that definitely one of the use cases you want to consider. But on the other end, you can also have a placebo effect, which is a positive imagined response to the data that's presented. And that's one of the reasons why actually, when we talk about interfaces, Whoop has a green, yellow, red interface where it tells you what your recovery score is. And that's where I think it's a little more inclined towards athletes. Oura Ring seems like it's a little more inclined towards general population, lifestyle, and wellness. A lot of the terminology can mess with people's heads and we won't even realize it. So I would say that, if you're not performing or training for a specific sport, the Oura Ring is a phenomenal thing. It's non-invasive. If you don't like stuff on your wrists, that's also something to consider. But the Apple Watch obviously has the most functionality to it because it tells you the time, you get notifications, but that also might be a distraction and increase your stress. In fact, there's this app called Welltory. And what it does is it pulls all the data. It also will look at your calendar and it'd be like, hey, during this thing, you actually get a lot of stress. Make sure you plan some downtime. And so there are apps that are taking the information being collected by these various devices and actually turning them into meaningful inferences, which is what Apple historically, while they had a lot of great sensors and data, it wasn't the best user experience because people were like, why does my limb asymmetry or why does my stride asymmetry matter? And in fact, they would not find any value in it whatsoever because it was so nuanced and convoluted that they wouldn't even look at it. So that's where I say, depending upon where you are, if you're a beginner, look at the simple stuff. Maybe your steps, maybe your sleep. Those are probably good ones for you to focus on. If you're a little more robust and advanced, probably look at your HRV, probably look at maybe some of the stride asymmetry stuff if you have an Apple Watch. Like, I think that there's a lot of really great value depending upon what you're trying to maximize. If you're trying to maximize recovery, probably want to pick the various devices and variables that are going to give you the most insight on recovery. If you don't know what the hell you're looking at, there's nothing wrong with getting a Fitbit or a Garmin or something that's very simple that you actually are able to interpret and leverage. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to collect stuff and just have it sit because then A, you're wasting money, and B, it's like it makes no sense. So also the cost. So how much was your Apple Watch, Brandon?
Oh, probably like 6 or 7, maybe closer to 8. But with the power of credit card points,
don't go into debt buying wearables, guys.
I use the credit card points.
Yeah, for sure. I forgot. He's the guy who knows so much about that stuff. But like, you do just want to be careful with use case and basically what you're going to pay for that. Right. So if you elect to get a Whoop strap, make sure you check the show notes. We have a little discount code for you. I think it gives you like a free month. But there's an Oura Ring discount code too that'll save you $40 if you want that. I don't think there's anything that exists for Apple Watches because they don't really have many sales. But yeah, if you're interested, and they have a pretty generous return policy, so check it out. I always say use yourselves as guinea pigs before you pass along to your clients. But the other consideration is upfront cost. So upfront cost, $600 to $800, right, for an Apple Watch Ultra, which oddly enough, the Apple Watch, I think 10 or 11, whichever one just came out, it's October of 24, actually is a better device from what I understand. The only difference is that it doesn't have oxygen saturation, which is one of the reasons why I haven't upgraded. They're trying to do the whole sleep apnea thing, which I think is a pretty helpful thing. Versus the other ones where if you look at Whoop, they used to be a upfront device cost, and then they went to a subscription-based model. And I think it's anywhere from $18 to $34 a month. right? So you take that across 12 months, that's $360. So it takes 2 years effectively to amortize the same amount of potential use that you would for an Apple Watch, which just has an upfront cost. And then on the last one, you have the ring. In this case, we're just referencing Oura Ring. There are a lot of other different wearables that exist that actually might work better if you're an Android user, an Apple user, or I just prefer to look at the big ones because they integrate well with the training apps that I use. And whenever I do coaching for nutrition or fitness or anything else like that, I don't want to have to ask the client. I like to have it just poured over. So, but Oura Ring will cost you $5 a month, but they'll also make you spend anywhere from $300 to $700 a month or upfront, right? So if you get the cheapest ring, and you don't really care about the color, like the rose gold one, some reason the most expensive, but it's like $299 again with the $40 off. You're looking at like $250, $260 plus tax, and then you also have another $60 every year that you're going to pay because of subscription fee, right? So that's $5 a month. So oddly enough, I mean, if you're looking at value, I would say, and you're an iPhone user, just get an Apple Watch. Get the Athletic app. Are there any other apps that you recommend people investigate, Brandon, when it comes to Apple?
Apple, so even the health app alone, which is free, if you wanted to, I know there's probably some calculators out there where you can enter in your info and it'll spit out. But again, it's the convenience. Are you actually going to take, a time out of your day to interpret this? I'm not saying there aren't. There probably are some like data fiends that are out, like hardcore data fiends though. Like I'm like, I like my data, but it's like plot
less
graph.
than 2%.
Yeah, probably not a lot, but Athletic, highly recommend Athletic if you have an Apple Watch. It's just it takes that Apple data and interprets it. It's like I think HRV, unless there's been some update recently. You can't. There's a section in the Apple Health, but I just have no idea what I'm looking at. Athletic takes that data and spits it out into a score, and that's really what these devices are doing. They're taking that and they're presenting it to you in a lot easier of a digestible way for you to understand that, kind of like an abstract, in data research. People would just read that abstract. Bottom line. Yep. Yeah.
Bottom line it for me. Yeah.
And it's great to know the behind the scenes, but again, the clients you're working with, I really doubt they'll ever ask about the nitty gritties. They're just like, hey, I don't know why I'm not feeling good. What does a 50% score mean?
Yeah. Oh, well, and to be fair, like when you start thinking about what does Apple Watch offer that Whoop doesn't, what is Oura Ring, there's going to be some sacrifices that you have, which is why you have to consider what is it that you're willing to give up. Whoop actually just recently rolled out their step count. Guys, it's trash. It's the worst step counter I've ever seen. It was like, hey, Andrew, you walked 14,000 steps. My Oura Ring was like, yeah, like 7. Apple Watch was like 7,300. I'm like, what the fuck, Whoop? You guys have been around for so long. And I think that there's a lot of potential in Whoop, which is one of the reasons why I keep it outside of my historical data, because they did buy a company called Push, which measured bar speed and was a barbell accelerometer. And I keep waiting for them to roll that out. So hopefully, Will Ahmed, if you ever hear this episode, please roll that out. Yeah. But like the Athletic app does a pretty good job of green, yellow, red, very similar to the Whoop interface. And that's where I'm saying like there's ways that you can figure out how to backdoor that. And basically make it meaningful for you. But Brandon said it wonderfully in that if you can't make sense of it, you're just going to overwhelm yourself and potentially get frustrated and waste a lot of money, because $300 is, that's not cheap, especially when you consider like that's a little more than 1 month of coaching from someone. So before you start either buying that for your clients or inviting your clients to spend money that they may have to make some hard decisions to figure out, because we're in a little bit of a recession right now and money's tight for everybody, then I would say, just be considerate of the constraints and the cost that arises. If money's not an issue, buy all 3, But I will say that from a coaching perspective, Whoop is my favorite because I can actually see sleep, HRV, recovery, resting heart rate. Like I don't have to ask the client. I just put them on one of my Whoop teams and then I can monitor them remotely, versus people that do an Apple Watch where you can share health information. The upload and the exchange has always been a little funky, not my favorite. And then I would say that like obviously the Oura Ring, you can have these things that are called circles, which kind of gives you an idea. It just doesn't break it down very well. It'll tell you, here's your sleep score. It'll tell you, here's your recovery score or your activity score and sleep, recovery, and something else. I think your stress. But it doesn't tell you how it calculates that number. I prefer to see, again, like the HRV, the resting heart rate, like those things, which Whoop will show you as a coach if you own that channel or that team. Oura Ring will not. Apple Watch, you have to dig for it and you have to let it sync on their end, which just means that's more work for them. So from a coaching efficacy perspective, Whoop is still going to continue to earn my business and you know, be the preferred coaching one, just because it's non-invasive. But you know, for people that don't like wrist-based devices, Oura Ring is not just as good, but it's better than nothing. So, you know, just my tactical ways of helping people pick which ones. Do you have any advice as we wrap up and butt against time here?
Yeah, I mean, same thing. Yeah, just to add on, and just because, and this is how I bought my Apple Watch Ultra, was like, oh, it has the newest, bestest ways to track data. For a while, I had to actually work into it physically. I was having some forearm pain for a little bit because of the band I was using was it landed, and it's just physically a larger device. And I've used the Apple Watches in the past, the bigger ones, and so this is the biggest one that's ever been on my wrist. And so it had actually affected my training from an actual physical side of things. All data aside, it was may not have been the best fit. I finally got a band that worked for my wrist, but that's something too to take into account. Just because it's the latest and greatest doesn't necessarily mean it's the best for your situation. I've also seen some people review the Oura Rings or any type of rings. They love it for everything outside of working in the barbell or working in a gym stuff, barbells, because it affects their training. Personally, I don't have any experience with it, but
it's terrible. I hate it.
I don't think I would ever wear it specifically for the gym. But yeah, you don't necessarily need the greatest or latest and greatest, and really look around, do your shopping. It is an investment up front. Reddit, I love Reddit because you're getting other people's real life experiences from it. Tech websites can be hit or miss because they most likely have some incentive to sell you the device by using links. Not to say that that's bad. They genuinely have some good stuff on there, but reading up reviews, doing your homework, because that every device is going to have a use case for everyone in a different way. So just be knowledgeable. It's like buying anything you would. It's an investment. It's financials, and again, if you don't got the money for wearable, I'm not saying go throw down $600-800 right now on a watch to improve your sleep, because there's other ways you can do that financially.
100%. I mean, and to Oura Ring's credit, the new one is like 0.1 millimeter thinner. It's 2.8 millimeters, which is kind of crazy. But you know, I tend to wear mine on my middle finger because it does reduce the amount of like discomfort from that gripping. I do find that it really changes how I grip stuff. I will definitely be sending this one back to Oura here after this 2-week trial just to feel it out. You know, supposedly it has 18 sensors versus the 8 in the original one. I don't think it really matters. And again, I don't find the most use case for that specific device. I would rather just have Whoop. Both seem like they integrate well. Whoop is probably the least probably the least friendly amongst other platforms, though. They seem like they're most proprietary, which, I mean, come on, guys, it's 2024. You should probably play nice with other platforms and help figure out that API stuff, but they do have the most convoluted process as it relates to if you want to get it to, you know, share information or have it automatically port, which we'll talk about automations in a future episode. But I think for right now, just to kind of recap, I mean, wearables are helpful from an awareness perspective. There are a lot of different kinds out there. So you have to figure out what you want to do and how you're going to use it. If you don't have a clear idea on how it's going to help you directly from what information you're looking for and how you're going to use that information to make a better training decision or recovery decision, I would just honestly forego it and find the thing that is going to be most useful, which is probably a watch for most people. And then the tactical, make sure you check it, use it. I mean, Brandon uses it first thing in the morning. He then determines if he's going to go in and train hard. But I think it's the best thing you can do is use it for moderating your intensity of the workouts and figuring out if it's a good day to train. The last thing I did forget is, you know, Brandon mentioned that he doesn't really know what to look for in the Apple Health app because there's so much data in there. And I will say that if you're looking at recovery metrics, if it's more than 10% different from your monthly average prior, it's October right now. So that means I'm comparing my day to day against September's average. And I look at my HRV. If it's more than 10% down for a couple days in a row, I know that that's an indication that something is maybe jacking around with my recovery. And I usually know what it is because I've had one of those for, over, almost a decade now. But I would say like 10% is like, hey, you should pay attention for a couple days. If it's more than 20% down, then that's usually an indication that something is probably really happening. And you just want to either take some time, maybe put yourself in a postseason, but probably just spend some time away from whatever it is you're doing, or it's an invitation for you to have that hard conversation you might be putting off, which is one of the reasons why I look at HRV, because it's not just physical stress. It also does help kind of quantify mental and emotional stress as well. So one of the reasons why I appreciate it. But any closing remarks, Brandon, as we wrap?
I think, yeah, you covered it all. It was just, that was a nice bow on top of this episode.
Bottom line up front, or at the back anyway. But yeah, all that to say, we've reached the end of the episode. If you have questions, comments, concerns, please just email us. Or actually, the best thing you could probably do is just DM us on Instagram. Our, podcast gram is at official Beyond the Pump. And that's where we really do love to field questions. And that's how we ultimately help generate some of these content ideas as well. So please, if you could, we'd really appreciate if you liked, shared, and, subscribed. So that way we can continue as this grows to serve you a better and better content that's more relatable, that's more relevant, and ultimately is going to help empower you to be a better coach. So with all that to say, thanks for being here, and we'll see you guys next time.